Okay, so to pick up where we left off, Katie, you were talking about supporting or not supporting celebrities online, and you were talking about how you can just block certain celebrities, ignore them, and move on. I believe just trying to get you back on that, the same train of thought.
I'll get there, but
Yeah.
I do remember saying that. Um, so yeah, like again, I think people idolize celebrities too much, and
Yeah.
I do think as much as it sucks, celebrities unfortunately do have a very huge platform for anything. And I think even if they say anything not politically, I think some things that they say can really influence generations of people. Like, I always use Taylor Swift as an example because Taylor Swift is just such a big icon right now, and everyone loves her and everyone agrees with everything she says. So I think when people like that speak up, it can really make a difference. But I also agree we can't expect everyone to do that. But I do wish like people would at least in their like spare time at least maybe try and help in ways they can, especially if they do support the conflict and don't just feel like talking about it publicly. Because I get that. Like, not every time I want to have like a public conversation about it, sometimes I like to just support within myself and just do what I can, not publicly always stating things. But I do understand like why it's such like a powerful thing, if that makes sense.
Definitely. I think there was some statistic of like when Taylor Swift told people to go vote, it was like an insane amount of people that voted that
Yeah.
day or registered. So I hear that for sure.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, Ellie, do you have anything else to say about that?
Um,
Just in general.
yeah,
How
I
we
think
can-
we're actually on the same page. I think I agree that they shouldn't have to post anything. I think it would be great if everyone had a good political take. Obviously, I think that would be awesome, but unfortunately, people don't. And I think sometimes, in some cases, silence is better than spewing some hateful rhetoric towards a group of people because someone told you to speak up.
I definitely actually really agree with that because I feel like I would rather hear people stay quiet than like speak up on an issue that they don't feel educated on or just feel like have a good stance on. Because obviously, if you're just going to spew like Palestinian hate or anti Semitic hate, like I would rather you just not, yeah, I just shush, like don't say anything.
Right.
So I definitely hear where I would rather just have them be silent than spew hatred.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. And then pull up my questions again. Katie, you kind of mentioned like on your campus, there's a lot of sort of activity with, advocating for Palestine and like their role in the conflict and sort of fighting back against Israel and some of their interests. So then to both of you, what is like our role as students when it comes to protesting this conflict? Do you think it's right for universities? I've kind of seen it this year where they're sort of cracking down on students protesting, and I think kind of rolling back some of the protections that students protesting have been given in the past. And do you think that these campus protests are making an impact?
Katie, do you want to speak on this first? Just because I haven't seen any.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think being in Milwaukee definitely has like an influence of its own, like huge city. Like and Milwaukee as a campus is very diverse. Like obviously we have a very big Jewish community and we also have a large Palestinian community. And for the most part, we don't have any problems. We all try and get along, but during some of this conflict, there were like issues that did arise. Like our library is named after like the first Israeli like Congress person, like a woman or something, the Golden My Ear Library at UWM. Um, and so someone spray painted Free Palestine on it. And the school like was like, you can't do that, blah 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 blah, like take it down, like, and people were getting in trouble. And like for me, that's hard because I kind of look at it from an artist perspective. Graffiti for me isn't art, it's a way to use your political free speech. And UWM is the public campus. It wasn't done inside the campus, it was done on the wall, which I believe technically is still a public building, even though I do understand that being a student, you do have limited rights when it comes to that. So, like, I don't agree with like defacing things or anything, but I'm also one of those people where it's spray paint. It's harmless. It wasn't anything super derogatory. It was just free Palestine. So I understand why people were upset about that. And I mean, we did have quite a few comments and hatred on both sides. People were being very anti-Semitic at our school, as well as people were sending a lot of hate to our Palestinian groups as well. So we've had definitely conflict between the two groups, and just from not between the two groups, but just like the campus in general, like people just not agreeing. And I definitely understand. And it's hard because I fully support like protests on campus. I think they're very useful. I think they have a place. I mean, we, a lot of like the news was talking about us. We were like the last school's encampment to get peacefully taken down. Our group actually came to a conclusion with our school to peacefully take it down and worked things out through other issues. So we had our encampment up for over 2 months, 2.5 months. And that was right on the art lawn because obviously most of us are art students. Um, but I do think they have their place. I do understand like people's safety concerns. But at the same time, I walked past that encampment every day. They were just playing games and like having food and talking. Like there was nothing remotely dangerous that happened. No one was being violent. If that was occurring, then I would understand the more urgency to get rid of it. But I personally was in full support of the encampment. It wasn't violent. It was showing peaceful protests. It was standing up politically and morally for what they believe in. I think students should have a right. I don't think, obviously, you should use violence in any way to harm others or things like that. But I do think it's important for students to be able to protest and not have their freedom restricted, I guess, to an extent to where you're not harming people.
Yeah, for sure. I think protest is so important, and I think that there's a reason why it's enshrined in the First Amendment, um, and there's a reason why the First Amendment was like it, we need freedoms as people. We need to be able to speak out against things we don't like because it's kind of just essential to our humanity. Also, there's all like marketplace of ideas and all that stuff, but
Mhm.
kind of. So I agree. And I really like that you brought in that you're an art major and that your perspective of graffiti is art. I really have truly never thought of it that way.
Mhm.
I don't think anyone's ever said that to me, but I think that's a really neat perspective.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, me being a legal major, my view of it is very different.
Yeah.
To me, graffiti is immediately I thought vandalism, the fines that come with that, the potential jail time that comes with that. And so to me, legally, spray painting over an Israeli woman, although I think that the practice of protest is really important. I think that there are reasons why you can't graffiti buildings, and obviously, like if we just said, yeah, you can graffiti because it's your freedom and your right to, then I think everyone would just graffiti all the walls and it would be kind of hectic. But I absolutely see, and I also could see being Jewish on campus and seeing someone spray paint over a successful Israeli woman's name, I could see someone, rightfully or not, maybe being a little bit hurt by that. Focusing less on the pro-Palestinian aspect and more on the anti-Israeli aspect. Um, that being said, we go to Eau Claire. It's super white. It's
Yes,
also
yeah.
mostly women. So I feel like there is kind of a desire as women that we don't want to spark any controversy. We want to just keep things kind of going with the ebb and flow of campus. And I feel like maybe for whatever reason, men are quicker to speak out about things on campus. At least that's my perspective. So I have not seen any Israel Palestine on either side, any
Yeah, like
encampments.
there was, I know last year there was like, oh, like a really small protest. Like it really, I think lasted like maybe an hour of people just kind of out on the campus mall with signs and flags and stuff like that and doing like some chants and sort of like walking around and stuff. And it was like covered, I think, maybe by the media, but yeah, you're right. Like it didn't really make a lot of headway because I think a lot of people also just didn't really know that it was happening. So that's kind of the
Mm-hmm.
only, yeah, the only one I know of. Sorry to interrupt, but
No, it's okay. I'm glad that you have noticed that too. I'm glad it's not just like I'd never get out or anything. Like there just really are not that many protests. I think that kind of goes to show probably people just aren't as educated on it as they probably should be. I think to protest about something, you have to be very confident in it. And I think unfortunately, at least the culture of Eau Claire has been very much stay out of it. It's none of our business.
Mm.
Um, we are a liberal campus, so I know there's a lot of pro-Palestinian sentiment there as well, but nothing to the point of escalating to a protest.
Yeah. See, I guess that's really interesting to hear because I think sometimes I forget like I go to Milwaukee. Like it's just so like I forget like how diverse it is and I'm like, "Oh, your campus didn't have like 20 protests like the last 2 weeks." Oh. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like I guess it's just like such a different environment. Like it's definitely very interesting to hear like that like other campuses like aren't talking about it as much, which I find interesting. But in a way, I guess that does make me a little more thankful that Milwaukee, like, even though like, because our like school has sent out like a thing that they are willing to work with both sides and that they want to make sure everyone's safe, taking the school approach, like, please don't harm each other. We all love you, like that kind of approach. But I think it is really cool to see that there are a lot more people educated here. Not to say that there aren't in like other places. I just think it's just a bigger group of people. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's just because we're just in a city and like in such a big city that like it does make me thankful. And like it almost makes me wish that people could experience these protests because like we've protested not just the Palestinian Israeli conflict, but we have had women's protests, we've had Black Lives Matter protests, we've had so many protests, abortion protests, like a lot of things. And it's just, it's actually really beautiful in a way to see people exercising such a right and like being so proud to like stand and walk for hours speaking their minds. So I definitely think, or at least I hope more campuses will at least get involved like in protesting.
Yeah,
yeah, do you
for
feel
sure.
like task Katie, considering that, like what from what we've seen, it's just been like kind of quiet on this issue. Do you think that these protests then, because maybe I don't really can't speak obviously to every single campus, but do you think
Mhm.
maybe some campuses like ours that are kind of outside of big cities, is this method like really moving the needle and like kind of helping to get things done if not a lot of campuses are
I
like
mean,
engaging in that protest?
and that's the hard part is because unfortunately the more people who protest, the more campuses that get involved, the more the issue builds and the more we get it going. And like when you only have so many groups like Madison or Milwaukee, for example, who are really kind of doing these protests or really like kind of striving for change, like you only see so much change. I mean, I know our protests did help at least on the UWM campus. I mean, we our pro-Palestinian organizations were in contact with like the deans and stuff, and they were trying to like come to resolutions about like the encampment and like where UWM's money is going, because there was a whole thing where we believe, I think in some part of UWM's time, they have donated money to Israeli organizations, if they still do. A lot of people were finding evidence that they still were, so that's kind of why these talks were happening, just for like background. But I think they definitely caused a movement. I mean, it got people talking, at least on campus. It got obviously a response from our chancellor and everything like that. And so, like, there definitely was change. Obviously, not as much change as people would have liked to see. But I also know that there's only so much universities can do in issues like these. And I think people forget that Milwaukee as a school only has so much power. And unfortunately, like, we can't control people who invest in UWM who are sending money to Israel. I mean, because I think people need to realize UWM doesn't have control over all of its investors and things like that. Obviously, if they're sending money as an organization of a school, that's a different issue. I personally don't have all that kind of information, but that was just kind of why people were upset and everything. But I do think it has the potential to help. I just, it has to unfortunately kind of be one of those like mass movements to get things going, at least on a higher level. Yeah.
And you
Definitely.
guys see like maybe that, oh, sorry, you go.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, I mean, when you think of protests, you want to do something that works, that's effective.
Mhm.
And I think that the great part about protests is that for a bit, it is kind of a mass movement. A lot of people can get behind it. I think
Mhm.
the issue, especially with boycotts, particularly with Starbucks, I noticed a lot of people were really not buying from Starbucks, and then pumpkin spice lattes came out, and then everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, like fall drinks and stuff like that." I think that with boycotts as a form of protest, are not terribly effective for that reason. And
Yeah.
also protests like on campus I think are great, but I think they kind of fall prey to the same idea of it's a hot thing to be pro-Palestine for a little bit, and then once it stops being trendy, everyone just kind of falls out.
Yeah. And I think that's the problem is people are very, oh, what is the word? People are very like, it's a specific word and I can't think of it. It's just
I don't
like,
know the word, but just like latching on to a trend, like just kind of,
exactly. And
yeah.
it's like, they're just like, oh, like I totally support this. And then like when it keeps going and going, people just lose focus and interest. And it's like, hey, these people are still like dying and like are still going through awful tragedies. Like, I love that you can tune it out, but like they're living it. So it's like it's kind of just like people just being like very fake in a way and kind of what they're supporting. And yeah, it's like supporting trends when it's just like, I think if you have a moral standpoint, you should constantly stick to that moral standpoint unless you've come to a different conclusion. But I think the problem is a lot of people are just, it's like a lack of attention. It's a lack of like attention span and willing to constantly stick to something.
Yeah, I think there's a word, I don't know if this is the word you're looking for, but a word that a lot of people use to describe certain fads like this that are really closely tied to human rights is virtue signaling, which is
Yeah.
kind of when people like, you know, virtue signaling is.
Yeah.
But I think that has been my biggest qualm with the pro-Palestine movement is just it seems like there's a big chunk of people who hop on it because it's a trend, that people are dying. They post that like AI thing of like something Gaza.
Yeah, like
It's
all
just
eyes on Gaza. Yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah.
thing, and it's like 4 million reposts, and they do that, and they think, okay, I've done my piece.
Yeah.
But because it's such a nuanced conflict, because people are dying, I think it requires a little more commitment.
Yeah. I also found the word I was looking for, performative. That's what I
Ooh,
was looking for.
performative.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah.
That's what I was trying to find. But yeah.
And again, I feel like that is sort of to interject my own opinion as a third party, but like just with social media, what you were talking about, Ellie, of just like, okay, I post about this. That's it. That's all I need to do. Then it's like, well, moving beyond it, making sure that it's not just like something that's trendy. And also, what does that say about us that like we made a conflict happening in the Middle East, which you pointed out, Ellie, also has been going on for like centuries at this point, into a trend? Like, yeah, let's just,
Like people dying are not trends. Like
right.
this is
Mm-hmm.
life. And I think you're right. I think it does just like involve social media and the fact that we can just like turn off our phone and then we don't have to think about it. Or it's like I think it's just that level of privilege that obviously we've never had to experience it, so we're not constantly thinking about it. But I think it does show like kind of just people's like I don't know, like people's just like lack of care almost, as well as just like willingness to like commit to something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very reckless to me.
Hmm.
For sure. And now let me see other questions. Yeah, I mean, we kind of already touched on this, but I mean, especially considering Donald Trump is going to be, coming into office in January. Should the current administration be doing more right now to support Palestine, or do you believe that they have been doing enough, taking enough action?
Um, well, I think from a violence perspective, anyone can look at the Israel-Palestine situation and say, we're in a position of privilege. We have money, we have power. Let's use it for the greater good. I think another big issue is that because we're so closely allied with Israel, a neutral position on it, or um, and especially a pro-Palestine position on it, could jeopardize our relations with Israel, and also how much Israel is willing to help us if we're in hot water in the future. Which I assume, as commander in chief, that's what the president will be thinking about. I don't think they're doing enough in terms of protecting people in the Gaza Strip, um, but I have faith that they're thinking it through before they make any foreign policy decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not hopeful, I guess. I think I would feel a little more hopeful if it was a more liberal government right now. And just with the people he's been assigning to who have taken very extreme stances and have even said some very extreme things about the conflict on both sides was just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So, unfortunately, I don't think they're going to do as much as they want. I think they will continue to do what they have been doing, which is pretty much take an Israeli support side. Because you're right, we have a long history of supporting them, and to try and back out of that support right now, and it would be a whole international affair dilemma that I don't think Donald Trump really wants to deal with. So he's not gonna. And it sucks. I mean, I wish he would maybe at least tell him, like, hey, maybe you should just like chill it out. But I also know that unfortunately he is a liar and he doesn't really care. And that was shown in 2016. And I don't really think we are going to see anything different. which is sad, but who knows? I really do hope I'm wrong. But as of right now, that is kind of my thinking is there will not be enough done on the issue.
Absolutely. I also think that people kind of mistakenly, and the president themselves kind of mistakenly put a little too much emphasis on domestic issues when the intention of the president is to be a foreign policy figure, is to be the face of America in international relations. So I think that if anything, Trump will focus on lowering taxes or whatever he did last time, or raising taxes for billionaires as he, or lowering taxes for billionaires.
Yes.
I don't even, yeah.
I
mean,
get what you mean. I got
he'll,
you.
okay, good. Yeah, I think if anything, he's much more focused with how the American people see him and how he can improve his image domestically. And I think that unfortunately, anything that falls outside the scope of America is going to be a second thought, not even.
No, absolutely. Because I feel like we saw that with his last presidency. I mean, like, and I think the other thing is a lot of the issues he tried to do internationally were immediately shot down because
Mm-hmm.
they were stupid. I mean, not just stupid, they were just also not like constitutional, not inconceivable. Like it was like an idealistic dream that he was trying to like be like, oh, we should get this done. Where I think people are like, thankfully there are people on his side that are like, actually, no, that probably would not be a good idea for the people or our country. So I do definitely agree. I think he's going to try and rebuild whatever image he has. Good luck to him because that's going to be a long, long, long rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
But it is sad that he'll probably focus on that more than like international affairs and like trying to not only better our country, but how other countries see us because other countries are not very fond of America. And I think other countries see us the way we see Donald Trump. And it's sad because I don't want to be associated as one of these awful no good people. But when we elect someone who is a felon and a sexual offender, it doesn't really show a good foreign figure.
And an insurrectionist. Don't forget that.
And an
Oh
insurrectionist.
yeah,
Yeah, let's not forget that
it's an
big
important
one.
one. Don't
Right.
don't forget
Mm-hmm.
that.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
guys, if we see another one, I think that's my last straw.
Yeah,
Like, if that
agree.
happens again, I'm done. Like, I think it's my time to move. I'm going to Denmark. No
Mm-hmm.
more
Yep.
politics for me.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, yeah, this has been a good discussion and just, do you guys have any like closing thoughts? I definitely think you guys reached a lot of agreements on these issues, which was really good to see. And yeah, do you guys just have any more closing thoughts about any of the questions, anything we talked about?
Um, I feel like I've said my piece. What about you, Katie?
Yeah, I mean, I figured we would probably come to most agreements. I'm not someone who likes to argue with people and take like a very strong stance. Like obviously I will fully support Palestine and I don't really support Israel. That's kind of my main stance. But at the same time, I'm a very realistic person and I understand that our government is our government and that certain things are just not going to work or are not going to be feasible. And I feel like we definitely kind of came to a lot of agreements. Like I've definitely agreed with a lot of the things you said. It made a lot of sense, like from a legal perspective, and yeah.
Yeah, and I really loved hearing your perspective as an art student. I don't think I know anybody who's an art major, so
Oh,
I
cool.
I know it's cool for me. Like it's I think it's such an important perspective, and I think that the art field, correct me if I'm wrong, tends to be very liberal.
It's very
So
liberal.
very liberal. Okay, okay. So I fully expected pro Palestine, and that's absolutely it's a completely justified
Yeah.
take. I think I again, just from a legal perspective, I kind of stand. I think that Benjamin Netanyahu is not a good dude. I think that what Israel is doing is taking it way too far. However, I understand that there have been issues on both sides in the past, and I would love to give some more credence to the nuances in the conflict before I take a side.
Yeah. No, I definitely understand because like I have read like I've obviously read about it and I've like tried to educate myself. So I only know some parts.
Mm-hmm.
Like and obviously like I know kind of I guess I would say I know more of the Palestinian side since I focused more on that. So like that's why I definitely try not to shoot down the other side. But I do think at least right now we can morally say that Israel is in the wrong. So that's why I kind of tend to lean more pro-Palestinian right now.
Right. That makes sense. And I would say I'm definitely not pro Israel. So wherever
Yes. Yeah, no, I do not get that. Don't worry.
that.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, thank you guys again for doing this.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time. And this again was such a good discussion. I feel like we reached, to use a Jubilee term, a
Oh.
middle ground, maybe.